Human blood splattered the grimy cell floor as Olivia screamed in excruciating agony. Boron grinned sadistically as he dug his razor claws into her flesh again. The reptilian Ithorian interrogator knew the human embassy girl was close to breaking. He just needed to push a little harder. On Earth, General Marcus Thompson slammed his fist on his desk. God damn it, they've gone too far this time. The abduction of a human child was an unforgivable provocation. Rage simmered in his gut as he turned to his aide. "Get me Captain Howard, now." Jesse Howard strode into the briefing room, his face hard as granite. The imposing super soldier had seen his share of shit. But kidnapping kids? That was a new low, even for the scaly Ithorian bastards. Thompson broke it down. "Howard, you're taking a team to Ithax Prime. I don't care what it takes. You bring that girl home alive, or we'll be neck-deep in a war we can't win. The Ithorians are just itching for an excuse. You get in, get out, and leave no traces. Fuck this up and we're all dead men walking." Howard gave a tight nod. Olivia's life and the fate of humanity itself now rested squarely on the shoulders of his hand-picked super soldiers. As the elite team suited up and boarded their stealth ship, each knew only too well the deadly price of failure. It was time to remind those alien fucks why you don't ever mess with Earth. The UEF stealth dropship glided silently through the night sky of Ithax Prime, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to the planet's defense systems. Inside the cramped hold, Captain Jesse Howard and his hand-picked team of super soldiers prepared for their most critical mission yet. As they approached the outskirts of Zathax, the Ithorian capital, Howard gathered his men around a holographic display. "Listen up," he said, his voice low and intense. "We're here for one reason, to bring Olivia home. Intel suggests she's being held in an underground facility beneath the High Council's HQ. We're going in quiet and fast. Mac, Tex, Doc, you're with me. We'll infiltrate the complex and locate the girl. Roach, Hawk, find a vantage point and provide overwatch. Take out any threats that might compromise our extraction." The men nodded, their faces grim with determination. They knew the stakes. Failure meant not just the loss of an innocent life, but potentially the start of a catastrophic war between humanity and the Ithorians. Using their advanced holographic disguise tech, Howard's unit slipped past the security checkpoints and into the heart of the headquarters undetected. But as they descended deeper into the labyrinthine complex, resistance began to stiffen. Ithorian guards, armed with deadly plasma weapons and shielded by personal energy barriers, poured into the narrow corridors. Suddenly, a searing bolt of plasma slammed into Doc's chest, dropping him to the ground. Howard cursed under his breath as he and Mac dragged the wounded medic to cover. "Tex, stay with him," Howard ordered. "Keep him stable. We'll push ahead and find Olivia." As Howard and Mac fought their way towards the interrogation cells, Roach and Hawk rained precisely aimed sniper fire on the Ithorian reinforcements from their rooftop perch. Each shot found its mark, scattering the enemy and buying precious time for the infiltration team. At last, Howard and Mac reached the room where Olivia was being held. They breached the door, only to find themselves face to face with Boron and his two subordinates. The massive Ithorians lunged forward with shocking speed, their razor claws extended. Howard and Mac met them head-on, their enhanced reflexes and strength more than a match for their alien foes. The close-quarters battle was brutal and bloody. Howard narrowly dodged a swipe that would have torn his throat out, then retaliated with a devastating series of strikes that left Boron reeling. Mac, meanwhile, took on the two subordinates simultaneously, his movements a blur as he put down one then the other. In the end, Howard managed to get Boron into a chokehold, squeezing until the Ithorian interrogator went limp. Mac zip-tied the subdued aliens, while Howard freed Olivia from her restraints. The poor girl was battered and bleeding, but still alive. "Captain," Roach's voice crackled over the comm, "you've got a heavily armed response team moving in on your position. You're cut off." Howard grimaced as he scooped up Olivia in his arms. They were so close, but getting out would be a whole new challenge. He glanced at Mac, saw his own determination mirrored in the other super soldier's eyes. One way or another, they would complete this mission, or die trying. Howard cursed under his breath, his mind racing to find a way out of this seemingly impossible situation. With their escape route cut off and Ithorian reinforcements closing in, options were limited. He keyed his comm. "Roach, Hawk, I need you to create a diversion. Draw those bastards away from our position." "On it, Cap," Roach replied, the sound of gunfire crackling in the background. Moments later, a series of explosions rocked the complex, the concussive blasts echoing through the corridors. Alarms blared as the Ithorian response team rushed to investigate the new threat. Seizing the opportunity, Howard scooped up Olivia, her small frame feeling fragile in his arms. "Mac, take point. We're heading back to Doc and Tex." The two super soldiers moved swiftly through the smoke-filled halls, their enhanced senses guiding them through the chaos. Howard nodded grimly. "We can't go back the way we came. We'll have to find another route." He activated his suit's mapping system, scanning for any alternative paths. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow maintenance tunnel. "That should lead us to the surface." The team moved out, Howard taking the lead with Olivia while Mac and Tex supported Doc between them. The tunnels were dark and cramped, forcing them to proceed in single file. Howard's suit lit the way, its built-in sensors alerting them to any approaching threats. They encountered small pockets of Ithorian resistance along the way, but the super soldiers made short work of them. Silenced weapons coughed, and close-quarters techniques were employed with brutal efficiency, leaving a trail of unconscious or dead guards in their wake. As they neared the surface, Howard's comm crackled to life once more. "Captain, we're pinned down up here," Roach shouted, the sound of plasma fire nearly drowning out his words. "We can't hold them off much longer." Howard's jaw tightened. He couldn't leave his men behind, but he also couldn't risk Olivia and Doc's safety. He made the only choice he could. "Mac, take command. Get the package and the rest of the team to the extraction point. I'm going back for Roach and Hawk." Howard turned and sprinted back into the heart of the complex, his weapon at the ready. He tore through the Ithorian defenses like a force of nature, his advanced weaponry and superhuman reflexes more than a match for the alien soldiers. He burst onto the rooftop, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. Roach and Hawk were hunkered down behind a low wall, their weapons glowing with heat. Howard slid into cover beside them, adding his firepower to theirs. "Glad you could join the party, Cap." Hawk grinned, popping up to take out an Ithorian sniper. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Howard replied, his own rifle barking in short, controlled bursts. Together the three super soldiers held the line, a wall of steel and determination against the Ithorian onslaught. Plasma scorched the air, and bullets tore through flesh, but still they fought on, buying precious time for their comrades. At last, the familiar shape of the UEF dropship appeared on the horizon, its cloaking field shimmering as it dropped low over the rooftop. Mac stood in the open hatch, his weapon spitting fire as he provided covering fire for Howard and the others. One by one, the super soldiers leaped aboard, Howard bringing up the rear. He paused at the edge, unleashing one final barrage before boarding, the hatch slamming shut behind him. As the dropship rocketed away from Zathax, Howard made his way to where Olivia lay on a medical gurney, her wounds bandaged and her eyes closed in exhausted sleep. He placed a gentle hand on her forehead, his voice soft. "You're safe now, kid. We're taking you home." But even as relief washed over the team, a new transmission from General Thompson shattered their momentary peace. "Captain Howard," the general's face was grave on the view screen. "We have a situation. The Ithorian High Council is accusing the UEF of violating their sovereignty. They've declared war on humanity." The UEF dropship shuddered as it tore through the atmosphere, its fusion engines roaring. Inside the cramped hold, Captain Jesse Howard gripped his restraints, his mind replaying the harrowing mission on Ithax Prime. They had rescued Olivia, but at what cost? The Ithorians were on the brink of war and billions of lives hung in the balance. Suddenly the comm crackled to life. "Captain Howard, this is Agent Bishop. I have critical information regarding the Ithorian situation. I've uncovered evidence that Olivia's abduction was orchestrated by a faction within the Ithorian government, led by a high-ranking official named Zardox. He's a ruthless warmonger who believes conquering humanity will establish Ithorian dominance in the galaxy. Rage surged through Howard's veins. So this was all a setup, a ploy to start a war? Precisely. You need to present this evidence to UEF leadership and the Galactic Council. It's our only chance to expose Zardox's plot and prevent all-out war. As the dropship touched down at UEF headquarters in Geneva, Howard and his team were met by a grim-faced General Thompson and a swarm of medics. Olivia and Doc were rushed away on gurneys, their injuries severe but treatable. In the debriefing room, Thompson paced, his eyes hard. The situation is deteriorating fast. Ithorian warships are massing on our borders. Skirmishes have already broken out. He turned to Howard. But you say you have evidence that could turn the tide? Howard nodded, presenting the data provided by Agent Bishop. Zardox, an Ithorian official, staged Olivia's abduction to provoke a war. He's the real enemy here. Thompson slammed a fist on the table. God damn it! This changes everything. If we can expose Zardox before the Galactic Council, we might just avert catastrophe. He fixed Howard with a piercing stare. Captain, I'm assigning you and your team a new mission. You're to travel to the Council's headquarters on Nexus and present this evidence. We're sending UEF diplomat Amanda Vance with you. She'll help navigate the political minefield. Howard snapped off a salute. Understood, sir. We won't fail. Before departing, Howard made his way to the medical wing. He found Olivia propped up in bed, her wounds bandaged, but her spirit unbroken. As he entered, she looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Captain Howard, as I thank you for saving me, for everything. She reached out, pulling him into a fierce hug. Howard returned the embrace, his resolve hardening into an unbreakable core. He would bring Zardox to justice. He would stop this war before it began, for Olivia, for humanity. As the team boarded a sleek UEF diplomatic craft, Howard gazed out the viewport at the stars streaking past. Somewhere out there, Zardox was plotting his next move, but Howard and his super soldiers would be ready. They would fight to their last breath to protect the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. As the UEF diplomatic ship touched down on the bustling spaceport of Nexus, Captain Jesse Howard felt a sense of unease wash over him. The towering skyscrapers and endless streams of hovercars were a far cry from the battlefields he was used to, but the stakes were just as high. Beside him, Amanda Vance, the UEF diplomat assigned to their mission, straightened her jacket and took a deep breath. The team disembarked, their eyes scanning the crowds for any sign of trouble. They had barely made it a block from the spaceport when all hell broke loose. A group of Ithorian maintenance workers suddenly drew weapons, opening fire on the team. Howard reacted instantly, diving for cover and returning fire. Around him, his super soldiers sprang into action, their enhanced reflexes and training kicking in. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the assassins pressed their attack. Howard cursed under his breath, realizing that Zardox must have learned of their mission. He had sent these killers to silence them before they could reach the Council. The super soldiers fought back with brutal efficiency, taking down the assassins one by one. But in the chaos, Vance was separated from the group, two assassins hot on her heels. "Tex," Howard yelled over the din of battle. "Get to Vance, we'll handle this." Tex nodded, breaking away from the fight and sprinting after Vance and her pursuers. They vanished into a crowded marketplace, Tex's enhanced speed allowing him to close the gap. He wove through the stalls and shoppers, never losing sight of his targets. Up ahead, Vance ducked and dodged, narrowly avoiding the assassin's shots. Tex put on a burst of speed, leaping over a cart and tackling the first assassin to the ground. They grappled, Tex's strength giving him the edge. He disarmed the assassin, then knocked him out cold with a swift blow to the head. The second assassin, seeing his comrade fall, turned and fled. Tex gave chase, cornering him in a dead-end alley. The assassin spun, raising his weapon, but Tex was faster. He closed the distance in a blur, wrenching the gun from the assassin's hand and slamming him against the wall. Before Tex could press for more information, the assassin bit down hard, his eyes rolling back in his head. Tex realized with grim certainty that the assassin had just triggered a suicide implant. He let the body drop, his mind racing. If Zardox had a mole inside the UEF, then nowhere was safe. Tex regrouped with Vance, and together they rejoined Howard and the rest of the team. As they made their way to the council chambers, they were on high alert, watching every shadow for signs of another ambush. At the entrance to the chambers, they were met by a squad of Galactic Council security, led by a grizzled reptilian named Commander Zorn. "We've been briefed on your situation," Zorn rasped, his clawed hand resting on his holstered sidearm. "The Council is aware of the gravity of your evidence. We will ensure your safety during the proceedings." As they entered the chamber, Howard's eyes widened in surprise. There, amongst the Ithorian delegation, was Boron, the sadistic interrogator who had tortured Olivia. Boron met Howard's gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. Howard's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Boron's presence could only mean that Zardox was getting desperate, willing to take increasingly reckless risks to silence the truth. As the team took their seats, preparing to present the damning evidence that would expose Zardox's treachery, the chamber was suddenly plunged into darkness. Shouts of alarm and confusion filled the air, quickly drowned out by the chatter of gunfire. Tracer rounds lit up the darkness, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the floor echoed in the confined space. Howard dropped to a crouch, his weapon drawn. He realized with cold certainty that this was no mere power outage. It was Zardox's endgame, a desperate, brazen attack on the very heart of galactic government. The Ithorian warmonger was all in, willing to risk everything to silence Howard and his team, to bury the truth and let the galaxy burn. As blaster fire stitched deadly patterns through the air above his head, Howard gritted his teeth. It all came down to this. In the darkness and chaos, he and his super soldiers would make their stand. They would fight to their last breath, to bring Zardox to justice and pull the galaxy back from the brink of oblivion. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would not fail. The fate of billions hung in the balance as bolts of plasma lit the darkness, and the battle for truth began. The darkness exploded into a hailstorm of blaster fire, the sudden violence blinding and disorienting after the tense calm of the council chamber. Captain Jesse Howard hit the deck, ears ringing, eyes straining to adjust, as tracers crisscrossed the shadowy space. Screams and shouts mixed with the weapons report, alien and human voices raised in terror and pain. Pushing himself to a crouch, Howard flicked on his rifle's light, the narrow beam illuminating a scene of utter chaos. Ithorian assassins, sleek black armor gleaming, advanced through the rows of seats, cutting down any in their path. Council members scrambled for cover, some falling in sprays of blood, others dragged to safety by Zorn's beleaguered security forces. Movement in his peripheral vision. Howard spun, sighting Boron, the sadistic Ithorian interrogator, making a break for the exit. Rage, cold and focused, flooded the super soldier's veins. That scaly bastard wasn't getting away, not after what he'd done to Olivia. He plunged into the winding corridors, chasing the fleeing Ithorian. Rounding a corner, he ran straight into a knot of Boron's soldiers. Howard didn't break stride. His rifle bucked in his hands, stitching a lethal pattern across the assassins' chests. Those that survived the initial burst closed in, vibroblades humming. Howard met them head-on, his own blade leaping to his hand. He moved like quicksilver, enhanced reflexes and strength turning each blow into a killing strike. Blade met blade, sparks cascading as he danced the lethal dance, leaving a trail of broken bodies in his wake. "Copy that," Howard grunted, slamming an assassin into the wall, the Ithorian's skull cracking like an egg. "Anyone have eyes on Vance?" "Affirmative," Hawk replied. "She's hunkered down in the comm center, patching her through now." "Captain Howard, do you read?" Vance's voice steady despite the audible chaos in the background. "I read you, Vance. Sit rep?" "I've accessed the Council's communication network, uploading the evidence against Zardox now. Every species in the galaxy is about to see that scaly bastard's treachery laid bare." Howard allowed himself a tight smile. Good work, Vance. Sit tight. We'll come to you once Boron is secured. He pressed on, hurdling fallen debris and Ithorian corpses. Up ahead, Boron ducked into a side passage. Howard followed, the passageway ending in a dead end. The Ithorian spun to face him, a snarl twisting his reptilian features. Boron lunged, claws extended. They met in a clash of steel and fury, Howard's blade turning Boron's razor talons again and again. The interrogator was strong, shockingly fast, but Howard was stronger, faster. Enhanced humanity against vicious alien brutality. Boron's claws raked Howard's armored chest, scoring deep gouges in the ceramic plate. Howard retaliated with a crushing overhead blow, his vibro blade shearing through Boron's shoulder, severing scale, muscle, and bone. The Ithorian reeled back, howling in pain and rage, but Howard pressed his advantage. A final devastating thrust buried his blade in Boron's chest, piercing the alien's cold, cruel heart. As Boron slumped to the floor, life fading from his slitted eyes, Howard stood over him, chest heaving. "That was for Olivia, you scaly fuck." The building shuddered, a deep rumble building beneath Howard's feet. His comm crackled to life, Mac's voice taut with urgency. "Boss, we've got a problem. Zardok's rigged the whole damn place to blow. Structural integrity is failing fast. We need to evac now." Howard cursed, his eyes flicking to Boron's lifeless body. No time to secure the prisoner. The mission, his team, the council, they took priority. "Copy that, Mac. Rally at the evac point. I'm on my way." He sprinted back through the collapsing corridors, the building coming apart around him. Rubble rained down, each impact bringing the structure closer to total failure. Howard's comm buzzed with chatter as his team coordinated the evacuation, herding the remaining council members towards the waiting dropships. He burst from the building, his suit's filters struggling to scrub the dust and smoke from the air. The once grand council chambers were a ruin, walls crumbling, fires raging out of control. Through the haze, he spotted his team, Vance a slim figure at their center, all herding shell-shocked council members aboard the dropships. "Howard, let's go," Mac roared over the cacophony of collapsing metal and stone. "This whole place is coming down." Howard dashed for the waiting ramp, his boots pounding on the buckled pavement. He leaped aboard just as the engines roared to life, the dropship lifting away in a whirlwind of dust and debris. Behind them, the council building shuddered, seemed to sway, then collapsed in on itself with a deafening roar. A massive cloud of dust and rubble billowed outward, obscuring the scene of destruction. The war, so narrowly averted, had claimed one final casualty. As the dropship clawed for altitude, Howard sagged against the bulkhead, his armor scored and battered, his body aching with a dozen minor wounds. But they had done it. Olivia was safe. Zardok's was exposed. The truth, at last, had prevailed. He looked around at his team, at Vance, at the battered but alive council members. They had fought hard, risked everything, and in the end, they had won. The galaxy would know peace, at least for a little while longer. Tex, his helmet cradled in one arm, met Howard's gaze. "Hell of a day, Cap." Howard managed a weary smile. "That it was, Tex, that it was." UEF reinforcements swarmed the shattered remains of the council chambers, securing the site and beginning the long process of sifting through the rubble. As Howard and his team disembarked from the dropship, a young UEF lieutenant rushed up to them, his face alight with excitement. "Captain Howard, sir. We've just received word. Zardok's is in custody. Galactic Council Special Forces apprehended him trying to flee Nexus. They're saying it was Ambassador Vance's broadcast that tipped them off." Howard turned to Vance, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "Looks like you're the hero of the hour, Ambassador." Vance returned the smile, her eyes bright despite the dirt and fatigue lining her face. "We all had a part to play, Captain. Your team. I've never seen anything like what you did in there. The galaxy owes you a debt it can never repay." As if on cue, a fleet of Ithorian warships, their hulls gleaming in the light of Nexus's twin suns, appeared in the sky above the ruined council chambers. Howard tensed, his hand dropping to his sidearm, but the ships made no aggressive moves. Instead, One by one, they began to turn, angling away from Nexus back towards Ithorian space. "They're standing down," Max said, his voice tinged with awe. "I never thought I'd see the day." Howard nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. They had done it. Against all odds, they had pulled the galaxy back from the brink. There would be fallout, of course. The Council would need to be rebuilt. Zardox and his co-conspirators brought to justice. Reparations made for Olivia and her family. But those were battles for another day. For now there was only the sweet taste of victory, the knowledge that for a little while at least, there would be peace. In the days following the attack on the Galactic Council, Captain Jesse Howard and his team found themselves thrust into the spotlight. News of their heroic actions spread like wildfire across the galaxy, and they were hailed as saviors by the UEF and the galactic community at large. Messages of gratitude and support poured in from every corner of the cosmos, praising the super soldiers for their bravery and selflessness. Amidst the whirlwind of attention, Howard and his team received an invitation to a special ceremony on Earth, where they would be awarded the highest honors for their service. It was a momentous occasion, a chance to celebrate their victory and to stand as a symbol of hope and unity in the face of adversity. As they prepared for the ceremony, however, Howard received an encrypted message from Agent Bishop. The contents of the message were alarming. Bishop warned that the mole within the UEF was still active and might be targeting the team. He urged Howard to keep this information secret, as they still didn't know the identity of the mole or the extent of their influence. Howard's mind raced as he processed the implications of Bishop's warning. He had thought that with Zardox's capture and the Ithorian stand-down, the threat had been neutralized. But if there was still a traitor within their own ranks, then no one was safe. He knew he would have to be on high alert during the ceremony, watching for any sign of danger. The day of the ceremony arrived, and Howard and his team made their way to the grand hall where the event was to take place. As they entered the room, they were met with a thunderous standing ovation from the assembled dignitaries and media. The UEF president himself stood at the podium, a proud smile on his face as he prepared to present the awards. But as the president began to speak, a sudden explosion ripped through the stage. The force of the blast sent Howard and his team flying, along with chunks of debris and shards of glass. Screams filled the air as the once orderly ceremony descended into chaos. Howard hit the ground hard, his ears ringing and his vision blurred. He could feel blood trickling down his face from a gash on his forehead, but he forced himself to his feet, his instincts kicking in. Through the smoke and dust, he saw a group of armed assailants making their way through the crowd, their UEF uniforms a mockery of the values they were supposed to represent. With a surge of adrenaline, Howard realized that this must be the work of the mole. They had chosen this moment to strike, when the team and the UEF leadership were at their most vulnerable. He knew he had to act fast to protect the president and neutralize the threat. As Mac and Tex moved to shield the president, Howard, Roach, and Hawk charged towards the attackers. They wove through the panicked crowd, their enhanced reflexes and training allowing them to dodge the hail of bullets that filled the air. The two sides collided in a brutal clash. Howard and his team fought with a desperate ferocity, taking down the assailants one by one. But for every attacker they neutralized, more seemed to pour into the venue, an endless tide of hostility. As he grappled with one of the attackers, Howard caught a glimpse of a familiar face among the chaos. His blood ran cold as he recognized Colonel James Blackwell, a high-ranking UEF officer who had been a vocal critic of the Super Soldier program. In that moment, the pieces fell into place. Blackwell must be the mole working with the Ithorians to sabotage the UEF from within. With renewed determination, Howard rallied his team. They fought their way through the sea of assailants, driven by the knowledge that they had to capture Blackwell alive to uncover the full extent of his treachery. They cornered Blackwell on the roof of the venue, the sounds of battle echoing from below. The colonel stood at the edge, his eyes wild and his uniform splattered with blood. He turned to face Howard and his team, a sneer twisting his features. What followed was a brutal hand-to-hand battle, a test of strength, skill, and will. Despite Blackwell's own augmented abilities, Howard and his team fought with a unity and determination that could not be matched. They moved as one, a well-oiled machine fueled by a righteous fury. In the end, it was Howard who delivered the final blow. His fist connected with Blackwell's jaw, a sickening crunch that sent the colonel crumpling to the ground, unconscious. As UEF reinforcements flooded the rooftop, securing the scene and tending to the wounded, Howard stood over Blackwell's prone form. He felt a mix of emotions wash over him, relief, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. They had won the day, but at what cost? The knowledge that the enemy they had been fighting was not just the Ithorians, but one of their own, left a bitter taste in Howard's mouth. As he looked out over the smoking cityscape, he knew that this was far from over. The true battle, the battle for the soul of the UEF, was only just beginning. The sound of boots pounding against metal echoed across the rooftop as UEF soldiers swarmed the area, their weapons trained on the unconscious form of Colonel James Blackwell. Captain Jesse Howard stood over the fallen traitor, his chest heaving and his fists clenched at his sides. Blood trickled from a gash above his eye, mingling with the sweat and grime of battle. "Captain Howard," a familiar voice called out. Howard turned to see General Thompson pushing his way through the crowd of soldiers, his face etched with a mix of relief and concern. "What the hell happened here?" Howard gestured to Blackwell's prone form. "Colonel Blackwell, sir. He's the mole. He orchestrated this attack, working with the Ithorians to undermine the UEF from within." Thompson's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. He knelt down beside Blackwell, checking his pulse. "He's alive. Good. We'll need him to answer for his crimes." As the general stood, he placed a hand on Howard's shoulder. "You and your team did well, Captain. You saved a lot of lives today, including the President's. But this is far from over. We need to root out any other traitors within our ranks, and we need to do it fast." Howard nodded grimly. "Understood, sir. We'll do whatever it takes to protect the UEF and the galactic community." As the soldiers began to secure Blackwell and cordon off the area, Howard made his way back to his team. They were battered and bruised, but alive. Mac and Tex had succeeded in getting the President to safety, while Roach and Hawk had helped to neutralize the remaining attackers. "Are you guys all right?" Howard asked, his voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "We'll live," Mac replied, wiping blood from his split lip. "But damn, Cap, Blackwell, I never would have guessed." "None of us did," Howard said, shaking his head. "And that's what makes it so dangerous. We can't trust anyone right now, not until we know the full extent of this conspiracy." As the team began to regroup, assisting the UEF forces in securing the venue and tending to the wounded, Howard's mind raced with the implications of what had just transpired. The attack on the ceremony, Blackwell's betrayal, the warnings from Agent Bishop. It all pointed to a far deeper and more insidious threat than they had ever imagined. He knew that in the coming days and weeks, they would have to be more vigilant than ever. They would have to question everything and everyone, trusting only in each other and in the unbreakable bonds they had forged through countless battles and trials. As the sun began to set over the war-torn cityscape, casting long shadows across the rubble and debris, Howard gathered his team close. They stood together, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For they were super soldiers, the best of the best, and they would not rest until the UEF and the galaxy at large were safe from the forces that sought to tear them apart. In the fading light of day, amidst the chaos and destruction, they stood as a beacon of hope and resilience, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. The battle was far from over, but with Captain Jesse Howard and his team leading the charge, there was no force in the universe that could stand in their way. They would fight, they would bleed, they would sacrifice, but they would never surrender. For the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and they would bear that weight with unwavering resolve and unbreakable unity. As the shadows lengthened and the sounds of battle faded into the distance, Howard looked to his team, his brothers in arms. "All right, people, let's get to work. We've got a traitor to interrogate and a conspiracy to unravel, and we won't stop until the job is done." With a chorus of determined nods and grim smiles, the super soldiers set forth, ready to face the darkness head-on and to light the way for all those who followed in their footsteps. They were the tip of the spear, the first and last line of defense against the forces that threatened the very fabric of their society. And they would not fail. Not now, not ever. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. In the cold, sterile confines of the UEF's Maximum Security Detention Center, Captain Jesse Howard and his trusted comrade Tex faced off against the traitorous Colonel James Blackwell. The interrogation room hummed with tension as they grilled the defiant officer, determined to unravel the tangled web of deceit that threatened the very fabric of galactic peace. Blackwell leaned back in his chair, a smug grin playing across his features despite the restraints that bound him. "You have no idea what you're up against, Howard," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "This goes far beyond the UEF, far beyond your pitiful understanding." Howard slammed his fist on the table, the metal surface buckling under the force of his genetically enhanced strength. "Enough games, Blackwell. Who are you working for? What's the end game here?" The colonel laughed, a harsh, grating sound that set Howard's teeth on edge. "You'll find out soon enough, Captain. But by then it will be too late. The gears are already in motion, and there's nothing you or your band of freaks can do to stop it." As Howard and Tex pressed Blackwell for answers, Mac, Roach, and Hawk worked tirelessly alongside Agent Bishop to unravel the mystery surrounding the colonel's betrayal. They pored over encrypted communications, financial records, and classified files, piecing together a disturbing picture of a vast, insidious conspiracy. "I've got something," Roach called out, his eyes locked on the holographic display before him. "Blackwell's been in contact with someone called the Overseer. Whoever they are, they're pulling the strings behind this whole operation." Bishop frowned, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Overseer? That's a new player on the board. We need to find out who they are and what they want." As the team dug deeper, they stumbled upon a trail of corruption that led them to the farthest reaches of UEF space, to a remote asteroid base hidden among the cosmic debris. It was there, they realized, that the answers they sought might be found. Wasting no time, Howard gathered his team and a hand-picked group of UEF Special Forces operators, setting out on a covert mission to infiltrate the base and uncover the truth. As their stealth ship approached the asteroid, they were met with a chilling sight. The base was heavily fortified, guarded by a motley assortment of mercenaries and rogue UEF soldiers, loyal to Blackwell and his mysterious benefactor. The battle that followed was fierce and bloody, a testament to the skill and determination of Howard's super soldiers. They fought their way through the base's defenses, their enhanced reflexes and strength giving them an edge against the well-armed defenders. Plasma bolts seared the air, explosions rocked the cramped corridors, and the screams of the dying echoed through the vacuum of space. As they pushed deeper into the heart of the base, Howard and his team made a shocking discovery. The Overseer was not an individual, but a shadowy cabal known as the Shadow Council, composed of powerful figures from across the galaxy, corrupt Ithorian officials, rogue UEF officers, and representatives from other alien races. This secret society had been manipulating events from behind the scenes for years, seeking to destabilize the galactic order and seize power for themselves. Armed with this knowledge, Howard led his team in a desperate assault on the base's central command center, where they found themselves face to face with some of the Shadow Council's most lethal operatives. The battle was brutal, a whirlwind of clashing blades, flying fists, and searing energy weapons. Howard and his super soldiers fought with a savage intensity, fueled by their desire to protect the galaxy from this insidious threat. In the heart of the command center, Howard confronted the leader of the Shadow Council, a cloaked figure whose identity remained shrouded in mystery. The two warriors collided in a flurry of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. They traded strikes with devastating force, neither willing to yield an inch. As they fought, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, the future of countless worlds resting on the outcome of this desperate struggle. Howard knew that he could not fail, that the price of defeat would be too high to bear. With a final Herculean effort, As Captain Howard battled the cloaked Shadow Council leader, trading blows in a whirlwind of fists and fury, His team moved through the base with ruthless efficiency. Tex and Mac fought their way to the central control room, dispatching the mercenaries that stood in their way. They tore through the firewalls, their enhanced minds processing the complex encryption as if it were child's play. "I'm in," Tex said, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "Downloading everything now, this data. The Shadow Council's reach goes deeper than we ever imagined." Mac stood guard at the door, his weapon at the ready. "We need to make sure this intel gets back to UEF Command. They'll know what to do with it." In another part of the base, Roach and Hawk moved with silent precision, planting explosive charges at key structural points. They worked with a grim determination, knowing that every charge brought them one step closer to crippling the Shadow Council's operations. "Charges set," Hawk reported over the comm, "ready to bring this place down on their heads." As Howard and the Shadow Council leader clashed, the cloaked figure's hood fell back, revealing the scarred and twisted features of Zardox, the Ithorian warlord. Howard's eyes widened in shock, the pieces falling into place. "You!" Howard growled, blocking a vicious strike. "I should have known. Olivia, the attack on the Council. It was all you." Zardox laughed, a harsh grating sound. "You've been chasing shadows, Captain. While you've been fumbling in the dark, the Shadow Council has been preparing for the future, a future where we control the galaxy." They exchanged blows, Howard's enhanced strength matched by Zardox's cybernetic enhancements. The Ithorian's eyes gleamed with a fanatic light as he spoke of the Shadow Council's grand plan. "You think you've won, but you're too late," Zardox sneered. "Even now our biological weapon is primed and ready. Once released, it will wipe out most of the galaxy's population, leaving only those loyal to the Shadow Council. From the ashes, we will build a new order." Howard's blood ran cold at the revelation. He redoubled his efforts, his blows fueled by a desperate need to stop Zardox before it was too late. They fought across the command center, smashing through consoles and equipment, each seeking to gain the upper hand. In a final desperate move, Howard managed to get behind Zardox, wrapping his arm around the Ithorian's throat in a chokehold. Zardox struggled, his cybernetic limbs flailing, but Howard held on, squeezing with all his might. Howard dropped Zardox's lifeless body, his mind racing. They had to get out, had to find a way to stop the weapon before it was too late. He sprinted from the command center, his team falling in around him as they fought their way through the remaining mercenaries. The base shook as Roach and Hawk's charges began to detonate, the explosions ripping through the structure. Howard and his team raced against time, dodging falling debris and collapsing corridors, the countdown echoing in their ears. They burst from the base just as the final charges detonated, the facility vanishing in a blinding flash of light and heat. The shockwave sent them tumbling, but Howard was already scrambling to his feet, barking orders into his comm. "UEF Command, this is Captain Howard. The Shadow Council's base has been destroyed, but they've activated a biological weapon. We need immediate containment and cleanup at these coordinates." As UEF ships descended on the site, Howard and his team could only watch, their hearts pounding, praying that they had done enough, that the galaxy would be spared the horror Zardox had planned. In the days that followed, Howard and his team were debriefed extensively by both UEF leadership and the Galactic Council. The data they had recovered proved invaluable, allowing the authorities to track down and apprehend the remaining members of the Shadow Council. The galaxy slowly began to heal, the scars left by the Shadow Council's machinations fading with time. Howard and his team were once again hailed as heroes, their names spoken with reverence by those they had saved. But even as the celebrations and accolades washed over him, Howard couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Shadow Council had been defeated, but their very existence hinted at a deeper rot, a hidden network of corruption and deceit that threatened the very fabric of galactic society. As he looked out over the bustling streets of Earth, watching the people go about their lives, blissfully unaware of how close they had come to annihilation, Howard made a silent vow. He and his team would be the watchmen, the guardians in the night. They would be the ones to stand against the shadows, to fight the battles that no one else could. For as long as there was breath in his body, Captain Jesse Howard would be there, ready to answer the call, ready to defend the innocent, no matter the cost. In the months that followed the Shadow Council's defeat, a fragile peace settled over the galaxy. Captain Jesse Howard and his super soldier team worked tirelessly to stamp out the last embers of resistance, their missions taking them to the farthest reaches of known space. It was during one such operation, as they scoured a remote moon for signs of Shadow Council remnants, that Howard received a cryptic transmission. The message, encrypted and untraceable, hinted at a looming threat that dwarfed even the Shadow Council's insidious machinations. Intrigued and wary, Howard arranged to meet the mysterious informant at a secluded rendezvous point. As he approached the designated coordinates, his hand rested on the grip of his sidearm, ready for any sign of treachery. The figure that emerged from the shadows was the last person Howard expected to see. Boron, the sadistic Ithorian interrogator who had tortured Olivia, stood before him, his once proud bearing replaced by a haunted, hunted look. "Captain Howard," Boron rasped, his voice strained, "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I come bearing grave news." Howard's grip tightened on his weapon. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't put a plasma bolt through your skull right now." Boron held up his hands, a gesture of surrender. "Because if you do, the galaxy will face a threat that will make the Shadow Council look like a mere footnote in history." Against his better judgment, Howard listened as Boron spun a tale of a rogue Ithorian general named Zorg, who had acquired a piece of ancient technology known as the Doomsday Device. This weapon, Boron claimed, could tear apart the very fabric of space-time, obliterating entire star systems in the blink of an eye. "Zorg is a fanatic," Boron said, his eyes haunted. "He believes that the Ithorians are destined to rule the galaxy, and he will stop at nothing to make that a reality. He plans to use the Doomsday Device to blackmail the UEF and its allies into submission." Howard's mind raced as he processed this information. If Boron was telling the truth, then the stakes were even higher than he had imagined. He couldn't take the risk of ignoring this threat, no matter how much he despised the messenger. With a heavy sigh, Howard lowered his weapon. "All right, Boron, I'm listening. But if this is some kind of trick, I swear I'll make you wish you'd died back on Nexus." Over the next few hours, Howard and Boron hammered out a plan. They would assemble a strike team combining Howard's super soldiers with a group of Ithorian rebels who had pledged to stop Zorg's mad ambitions. Together, they would infiltrate Zorg's stronghold, destroy the Doomsday Device, and bring the rogue general to justice. As Howard prepared his team for the mission, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his gut. He had fought alongside Boron's people, had seen the horrors they were capable of inflicting. Now, he was being asked to trust one of them, to put his life and the lives of his team in the hands of a creature who had once reveled in the torture of a helpless child. But the stakes were too high to let old grudges cloud his judgment. With a final check of his gear, Howard boarded the transport that would take them to Zorg's hidden base. The die was cast, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As the strike team approached Zorg's stronghold, nestled deep within the heart of an asteroid field, Howard felt a sense of foreboding wash over him. The base was a fortress, bristling with advanced weapons systems and shielded by a powerful energy field. "Zorg's no fool," Boron said, his voice tight with tension. "He'll have genetically engineered super soldiers guarding the Doomsday Device. We'll need to hit hard and fast if we want to have any chance of stopping him." The team split into two groups, with Howard leading the assault on the main compound, while Boron and the Ithorian rebels worked to sabotage the base's defenses from within. As Howard and his super soldiers breached the outer perimeter, all hell broke loose. Plasma bolts filled the air, sizzling past Howard's head as he ducked and weaved through the chaos. Zorg's super soldiers were every bit as formidable as Boron had warned, their enhanced strength and speed making them a match even for Howard's team. But the super soldiers had an edge that the super soldiers lacked: unity. They fought as one, covering each other's backs and working in seamless coordination. Slowly, inexorably, they pushed deeper into the base, leaving a trail of broken bodies in their wake. As they neared the central chamber where the Doomsday device was housed, Howard's comm crackled to life. It was Boron, his voice strained and breathless. "Captain, we've managed to disable the energy shield, but Zorg's onto us. He's heading your way and he looks pissed." Howard grimaced, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Understood. We'll take care of Zorg. You focus on getting that device offline." Moments later, the doors to the central chamber burst open, revealing the towering figure of General Zorg. The Ithorian was a monster, his body a grotesque fusion of flesh and cybernetics. His eyes blazed with fanatic fury as he beheld the intruders who dared to challenge his grand vision. "You think you can stop me?" Zorg roared, his voice a metallic growl. "I am the future of the Ithorian people, the architect of our destiny." Howard stepped forward, his weapon leveled at Zorg's chest. "You're nothing but a madman, Zorg, and we're here to put an end to your insanity." The battle that followed was unlike anything Howard had ever experienced. Zorg was a force of nature, his cybernetically enhanced body granting him strength and speed far beyond any normal Ithorian. Even with his super-soldier enhancements, Howard found himself hard-pressed to keep up with the general's relentless assault. As they fought, trading blows that would have shattered normal bones, Howard caught a glimpse of Boron and his rebels working frantically to disable the Doomsday device. They darted around the massive machine, planting explosives and sabotaging key components, even as Zorg's remaining forces closed in around them. In that moment, Howard realized that Boron had truly changed. The Ithorian who had once reveled in causing pain was now risking everything to save the galaxy from annihilation. It was a testament to the power of redemption, to the idea that even the most lost soul could find their way back to the light. With a final, desperate effort, Howard managed to gain the upper hand against Zorg. He hammered the general with a flurry of blows, driving him back towards the Doomsday device. Zorg fought like a cornered animal, his cybernetic limbs lashing out with bone-crushing force. Just as it seemed that Howard might prevail, Zorg unleashed a hidden weapon, a plasma blade that sprung from his forearm. The searing edge sliced towards Howard's throat, a killing blow that would end the super soldier's life in an instant. But the blow never landed. Instead, a figure hurled itself between Howard and Zorg, taking the full force of the plasma blade. It was Boron, his eyes wide with shock and pain, as the searing energy tore through his chest. Time seemed to slow as Boron crumpled to the ground, his life's blood pooling around him. With his last breath, the Ithorian looked up at Howard, a small smile playing across his reptilian features. "Do it," he whispered. "Finish this." Tears stinging his eyes, Howard surged forward, his fist slamming into Zorg's face with all the force of his grief and rage. The general staggered back, his cybernetic body sparking and twitching as Howard pummeled him mercilessly. With a final sickening crunch, Zorg fell, his mangled body crashing to the floor beside the Doomsday device. Howard stood over him, chest heaving, his knuckles bruised and bloody. "It's over," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's finally over." As the rest of the strike team secured the chamber, Howard knelt beside Boron's fallen form. The Ithorian's eyes were glassy and still, his lifeblood staining the metal floor. "Thank you," Howard whispered, his hand resting on Boron's shoulder. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." In the aftermath of the mission, as the UEF and its allies breathed a collective sigh of relief, Howard and his team were once again hailed as the saviors of the galaxy. But for Howard, the victory was bittersweet. He stood before a sea of mourners at Boron's memorial service, his dress uniform heavy on his shoulders. As he listened to the eulogies, each one praising the Ithorian's bravery and sacrifice, Howard couldn't help but reflect on the true cost of peace. It was paid in blood and tears, in the lives of those who fought and died so that others might live. It was a burden that Howard and his team would bear for the rest of their days, a constant reminder of the price of freedom. As the service drew to a close, Howard stepped forward, his hand resting on the polished metal of Boron's casket. He bowed his head, his eyes closed in silent tribute to the fallen hero. "Rest easy, my friend," he murmured. "Your fight is over, but ours goes on." With a heavy heart, Howard turned to face his team, his eyes hardened with resolve. They had won a great victory, but he knew that there would always be new threats lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. But they would be ready. They would stand tall, the shield and sword of the galaxy, the defenders of the innocent and the oppressed. For as long as there was breath in their lungs and fire in their hearts, they would never rest, never waver in their duty. They were super soldiers, the best of the best, and they would lay down their lives to preserve the fragile balance of the universe. It was a solemn vow, a sacred trust, and one that they would honor until the end of their days. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.